Are we starting now? All right, we're starting now. Good evening. My name is Carl Lukings, and welcome to Horizon Solutions. Welcome to Resource Stage. It looked there for a minute that there was going to be just a few of us in the room, and now there's just a few more, which is awesome. Thank you for coming. Thanks for getting out of your driveway, if that was an issue for you tonight. So again, my name is Carl, and tonight we are talking about troubleshooting. We have been joking around the office that a few months ago when we were discussing what sessions we were going to do this year, Jordan said, hey, we should do something on troubleshooting. I think it would be really great. And without really thinking about it too much, I said, yeah, that's fine. We'll do that. And then after we announced it, I started thinking about it and I thought, you know, trying to explain troubleshooting is not that easy, because you're talking about a whole bunch of different ideas and you've got a lot of people's different opinions on how do I troubleshoot something. And it's one thing to troubleshoot, you know, just one individual thing, and it's another thing to troubleshoot, you know, an entire system. And, you know, as Scott just mentioned here, it's one thing if you want to just troubleshoot, you know, just how does a light work? And then it's another thing if you're trying to troubleshoot a network problem. And how do those two things work together? So tonight, we're going to kind of walk through a bunch of different things, and we're going to try to do it in such a way where we've got examples on how different things work or don't work. And we're going to see what we come up with here. And please feel free to ask questions. We've got some examples, but the goal of tonight is not to necessarily teach you when this happens with this light, what do you do? It's more about what kind of thought process should I be going through as I'm working through something. And, you know, the first thing I would say is, what happens when the light doesn't work? What happens when the light bulb doesn't come on? And I can just keep turning this and nothing's going to happen. Because you could say, well, is it the bulb? Is it the socket? Is it the switch? Is it the cord? Is it the connector? It could be the connector, right? It could be the outlet. It could be the wire in the wall, the breaker, the transformer, the main switch that's out there. It could be the transformer at the street, the main transfer switch. It could be the lines from Bruce Nuclear, or it could be that there's a nuclear problem. And that's why our light isn't working. But how do we figure this out? How do we get to the point and we say, well, this light bulb isn't working? And we would say the first step is we need to identify what the issue is. So what's the issue here? The light won't turn on. That's right. And so the easy thing to do, and you know, so when you say identify the issue, what's the problem? It worked before, what changed? Who touched it last? Right? That's a pretty easy one to ask. But when you're looking at this and you're going, okay, well, how do I figure out what's working, what's not? The first thing that people typically do is they'll typically say, well, I need to look at the light bulb. Right? Because this is the thing that we've all done before, and we've all said, well, if light bulb doesn't work, let's pull out our light bulb and find out what's going on. The quick thing would be to just find another light bulb, throw that in there, and see if that works, which is it's not working. So now where are we at? We got to figure out, okay, well, how do we test this? And figure out, okay, do I have two bad light bulbs or do I have something else going on? And at that point, then we need to start thinking about, well, what kind of test equipment do we have that we can start looking at these problems and try to figure out what's going on? So I have a multimeter here, and I promise that I'm not going to show you anything with a multimeter that you shouldn't be doing. How's that for... So I've got this multimeter here, and Jake, I think we can switch to the multimeter. We'll see. There we go. You can see that. The easiest way to test this, I should say that right now I've got this set to continuity. So all it's going to do is, can you hear that? Hold on, put it right by my mic. Okay. So as I touch the two leads together, then it's going to make a beeping sound to tell me that there's continuity there. So I can take that first light bulb and hold this here, and I don't get any continuity. So that would tell me, I know that the way a light bulb works, that this light bulb's probably a problem. Let's test this one. That one seems to be fine. So I have swapped out one thing, and now I've checked this thing and confirmed that this thing is working, and I confirmed that it's working with a device that I confirmed that it's working. Do you see what I'm saying? Are we following along so far? So I'm testing this. This is working. I'm testing the bulb. It's working. But I already put this in here. Oh, I'm going to end up with 2 broken bulbs in a second. I already put this in here, and this isn't working. So now I have to go back and look at this and say, well, what's next? What's the next piece here that could be a problem? The next piece I have in my circuit is this cable. And I'm going to take this cable, I'm going to unplug it from there, and I'm going to plug it into a known power source. You're going to have to trust me on this one. I'm going to plug it into an outlet on the floor here that other things, including my computer, are plugged into. So I'm going to say that is working. Okay? So I'm going to plug that into here and bring this up, and I'm going to grab this guy. Does everybody know what this is? You seen this before? Okay, if you haven't seen this before, the way this is supposed to work is that, the way this is supposed to work is those 3 lights will light up in a different way depending on what is right or what is wrong with your power. And this is a really handy tool that you can use for testing power connections in your house or in your work or wherever, without having to pull out a multimeter and without having to do anything dangerous. So I'm going to take this extension cord, I'm going to plug this into here, and nothing's lighting up. So now I'm at a spot where I'm testing with a piece of equipment that I now don't know whether or not this piece of equipment works. And now I have a cord, an extension cord, that I don't know if this extension cord's any good. So what do? What's my next step? Check this tool on something that I know that it works. Okay, well, I already said that this outlet down here works, so I'm going to just... well, this isn't good. I don't have a camera down here. I'm going to try a different extension cord. I'm going to pull out this extension cord here, and let's try this one and see if this one works. Same outlet. Plugged into here. And this guy gets me nothing there, and then 2 yellow, which, if you can read that, says correct. So now I know that this extension cord works. Theoretically, also, that my tool works. Okay? So I've confirmed that my bulb works, I've confirmed that extension cord's bad, and I've confirmed that this extension cord is good. Are we all buying this so far? This isn't a magic trick. Okay? So, well, I'll just leave that plugged into there. So now, when I take this and I plug this in here, then my light bulb works. Hey, oh, thank you, Jordan. Thank you very much. It really isn't a magic trick. So, what have we done there? What are some of the key points that we did through that really quick exercise? Anybody? Oh, hold on 1 second. If you haven't been here before, I'm supposed to throw this to you, and then you can talk into the black part at the top just so that everybody online can hear you. You can just talk right into the black part.
You start at the end point and then work your way back as many steps as necessary.
Yep.
to find out what the issue is.
Yeah. And I did, right. I started at the end and worked my way back. The end being the light bulb itself, right? And I worked my way back to where the source was, in this case, power, and checked those things. But the other thing that I did is that I confirmed my test equipment was working. And the other thing that I did is that I only changed one piece at a time. I changed the light bulb, and then I changed the cable. And I tested that light bulb to make sure that that light bulb was okay before I went on. If I didn't have a way of testing the light bulb to confirm that it was okay, I may have had to just put the old light bulb back in there and keep going, which would have put me in a bit of a circle and a bit of a cycle. So, with that being said, let's move on. So, step number 1, identify the issue. Step number 2, document the problem. For tonight, I'm going to say that documenting the problem was, we have 2 cameras on me, and that's the story I'm going with for tonight, because we don't have all that time to write everything down. But when you do this, you should go through and document your problem. When did it first stop working? What does it look like now compared to what it looked like before? Well, the light bulb was black. Take photos, videos of the different components. What components were involved? Facts are important. There are so many times when we're talking to somebody and we say, hey, so tell us about how it was working before. Tell us about how it was working now. And the story's kind of, well, I did this, but I can't remember if I did it like this or if I did it like this. The more you can document, the better off we're going to be. So much easier it is going to be able to go through. And often we find that when people document it, they figure it out themselves. Because they can go back and say, well, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Oh, wait. I forgot about this. I should have done this. Okay. The third step is check for power. Almost everything that we work with, it's important to check for power. Almost everything. When we get phone calls from people and we're like, hey, did you turn it on? I am going to try my hardest to not say any names tonight. Okay? We do some work with a community center group in Kitchener, and we installed their system there a year or so ago, and it's awesome. It's a very cool community center, and we did some cool stuff there. And they were having a problem with a network issue a couple of weeks ago. No problem. Network issues happen sometimes. It's fine. We went in there, we took care of it, cleaned it up. The next day, we got an email from some of the folks there, and they said, hey, we're having a problem with the power in the rack. The power's not working. We're saying, oh, that's weird. And they said, Chris was here. Is there something that Chris did that created this problem where the power's not working? And nothing, like they plug into the outlet right on the front of the rack. It's like a mid-Atlantic power conditioner. And I said, can you send me pictures of what's going on? And when they sent me the pictures, we get looking at it, and Chris and I are looking at the pictures, and sure enough, that thing's not powered up. And the amplifier that's above it's not powered up. And we're looking at it, and I sent her an email back, and I said, just to the left of the photo, there is a button. And it kind of looks like it's got a power image on it. Can you just press that button and get back to us and let us know how it goes? She emailed back about 10 minutes later. We're so embarrassed. It was just the power. They had just turned it off. Somebody had just turned it off and they didn't turn it back on. It happens so often. So check the power. But you also need to know what's the power requirement for your device. Do you actually have the right power? Do you have power that's good? Do you have power that's actually plugged into the right thing? One of the things that we did when we were putting this together today, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in a second, but one of the things we did is we talked to a lot of different people before we got to this point tonight, because I wanted to get different opinions from people in the industry on how to troubleshoot things. And one of the people we talked to gave this great story. He was a sales rep for a number of years for this manufacturer, actually. He said they showed up to a trade show and they plugged everything in and everything was working fine, except they couldn't get data to go from the lighting consoles to the fixtures. Everything was plugged in, everything was wired, but for some reason they couldn't figure out why is it that the consoles were on, the consoles were sending data, the fixtures were there, and they weren't working. It turns out that, and you're going to have to follow this through with me for a second. It turns out that the power that went to their trade show booth was all 220. The consoles have switching power supplies in them. They could all take 220. All the fixtures could take 220, but the network switches that were in between could not take 220. They all now had bad power supplies in them, and they no longer worked. But they couldn't pass data between the console and the fixtures, and everything looked like it was fine. But that middle piece, that important piece, was shoved underneath a table, and nobody was looking at it. So did they have power? Yes. Did they have the right power? No. Did that create more problems for them? Yes. The other thing that comes up in our industry all the time is data. Do you have the right data? Is the data plugged in? Is it configured correctly? There's a whole lot of different pieces to that. Let's try to do another quick example here. I've got a couple of fixtures right here, and I have this console. Are you able to see that there okay? Maybe not too bad. Maybe I'll just try to bring that down a little bit. Lights, they're always an issue. So if I bring up this light, that should be this light right here. I don't have any light coming out. What's my problem? Anybody? Let's identify the problem first of all. We identify the problem, there's no light coming out. Does the light work? Well, let's talk about power for a second really quickly, because that's on our checklist. This thing, let's just make sure it's got power. It shows that there is, we've got a power cable going into it. And if I hit this button here, I can see that it's got power. So I've got data in theory because I've got a data cable going from here into the back of that fixture. What do you think? Anybody? Is it the right data? Well, let's find out. If you know anything about theatrical lighting fixtures, a theatrical lighting console to work with a theatrical lighting fixture in 2025 needs a fixture profile. So you need to tell the console how is the DMX set up to output to that fixture. So I have a handy dandy tool. I use this tool all the time, and I tested this tool before we started tonight, so I know this tool works. This is a City Theatrical DMX cat. It's awesome. It allows me to take take control of any fixture, any modern fixture, and I can control that light from my phone. And I can go to RDM, and I can see that that fixture is right there. That is a color source spot V, MV, meaning it's the multiverse version. And I can go to RDM, and I can see that fixture, and I can see what the status is of that light. The sensors and stuff. I can see what temperature it is. So the light's working. There's control to it. Why is it that that light's not turning on? Here, I can even hit this button here, and it's sending a signal to it to tell the light to flash. This is one of the most common issues with fixtures like this that we get phone calls for, and people who are setting up lights will commonly say, I don't know what's going on. It's not working. Does anybody know?
So would it be like they swap out a fixture, but they don't put the fixture profile into whatever the controller is?
Yeah. So right. So what he was saying is that if they didn't set the right profile or the right DMX address in the console, yeah, that's very possible. I have another suggestion. It's also possible that the shutters were closed and that the light's absolutely fine and we just had the shutters closed. It's not a magic trick. But this is the way this can go really, really quickly, is that I can end up going and pulling out my expensive test equipment and that kind of stuff, and at the end of the day, it's just something like this. So let's go back to here. I'm going to plug this back in because now I know that that fixture is doing something. And I can go to control here, and I can go, oh, okay, here we go. It's blue. And I can go over here, and I can say that's red. And I can go to green. So this seems to be working. This seems to be good. Except that should not be doing that. So this comes back to the same thing that we were talking about before, and that is that I've got this fixture as color source spot direct, and this is not the way the profile is set up. So I'm not going to go through the process tonight because it takes a bunch of fooling around, but this fixture, it actually doesn't take that much fooling around. What am I talking about? I should just do it. If I go to this fixture and go like that, and then go like this, I should have control over the light. And it's going to the right things now. So, sometimes the problems are complicated and I have to get into data, and sometimes the problems are the shutters. Okay? All right. I got more. We could talk about lighting, and we might do that a little bit later. Check every step along the way. As you're going through things, think it through each part. Is there power? Is there data? Have you opened the shutters? When we do shows and we're hanging fixtures, the first thing we do is we hang the fixture, open the shutters. You have to. You don't just open the shutters. It saves you so much time. If you're using a Fresnel and it's got barn doors, open all the barn doors. All that kind of stuff. Okay? When you are checking each step along the way, there's kind of two different schools of thought on this. The one is check at the end and you work your way through. That is the way a lot of people do this. And that makes tons and tons of sense. There are those also who say, no, I'm going to start at the source and work my way through. It's two different schools of thought. Sometimes you need to start at the end. And if that gets you so far, and if that's not working, sometimes you need to start right back at the beginning again. And you need to know when to do that. What we've talked about so far are kind of 5 quick steps that we use to quickly look at things. Almost everything we do when we're troubleshooting, we start with those 5 things. But checking the steps along the way, we've kind of got this down into 12 rules for testing. So as you're checking those steps, these are the 12 rules that we've come up with. And I say it's a group effort. Again, when Jordan and I were talking about doing this evening, and I started to get a little bit concerned about the fact that I was going to say some things and then other people are going to say, Carl's crazy, for various reasons, but specifically about this. And I felt like I needed to make sure that I heard from other people before I started going through this, because I figured I was going to forget some things. So what I did is I sent out an email to a number of people that I know in the industry who do troubleshooting all the time in their jobs. And those people do all kinds of different things. And some of the people you've seen here before teaching resource stage seminars, some of those people you've never heard of before, but I guarantee you all those people do some really interesting things. I then collected all of their comments about troubleshooting, and then we all sat down in here a couple of weeks ago, or a week ago, I guess, all of our staff, and we talked it through ourselves. And we came up with these 12 rules for testing. These are not the only things, these are not the only way, but we feel like this is a pretty good way to work through this. And one of the things that did come out of that discussion was sometimes things need to move really fast when the doors are about to open for the show. So take everything that I'm going to say tonight as some advice, but there are times when things need to change based on, is their audience coming into the room right now? Are we partway through the show? Do we need to consider some things a little bit faster? Okay. Are we good so far? All right, cool. The shutters. Don't assume that it's always the complicated answer. If you've been around Horizon before, there are a couple of signs that you'll see around our office, and this is one of them. Oh, sorry. This is one of them. This is hanging on the wall. It looks a little bit different, but this is hanging on the wall in our office because I think it's super, super important. And I think that sometimes we really do make things way more complicated than we need to. Sometimes it's just the very simple answer. And often that's, have you checked the cable? Have you checked to see whether or not the issue is just the cable? Because there's a good chance that it could be the cable, especially if it's that USB cable that's been sitting in the bottom of your desk and you're trying to use it for something that you just bought today, but it's been sitting in the bottom of your desk for the last 7 years. It could be the cable. Okay? Number 1, don't assume it's the complicated answer. Number 2, always change one thing at a time. When I said that we polled a number of professionals from the industry and asked their opinion, this one thing came back from almost everybody. And they did not say this because they dreamt it up themselves. They came up with this because they know in their professional experience that if you change more than one thing at a time, you are going to get yourself into trouble. And it's going to take you a lot longer to try to figure out what the problem is if you are not just changing one thing at a time. We probably could have done 20 rules, and this could have been 9 of them because this is so important. Okay? If what you changed didn't provide the desired outcome, change it back. So, I have a problem. I think it's this. I changed that. It didn't fix it. All right, I'm just going to keep moving on. Well, if you changed this and you don't change it back, you may have just created a different problem for yourself. So change things back so that then you know exactly where the problem was. Does that make sense? Okay? All right. Number 4. Document the changes. We already said document once earlier, right? What you did, how you did it, and what happened to make you think that this was or wasn't the fix. I have seen professionals in the industry, and I have done this myself on more than one occasion, where I will go through and I will fix a problem, and I don't necessarily document exactly what happened and how it is that I fixed that. And then one of a couple of things happens. It may be that I go and do the same dumb thing again and run into the same problem later, right? Or it could be that I don't document the problem, and then later on something else breaks, and I can't remember what was it that I did to fix that. What was it that I did that might have actually just been a temporary fix? Okay? So as you're working through things, document the problem, document what did work and what didn't work. We're going to talk about this again in one of the next rules, but part of the reason for this is so that if and when the time comes that you're going to contact Horizon or one of the manufacturers or whoever it is, the more information that you can provide that's documented, way better chance of us being able to help solve the problem. Okay? All right. Confirm your test equipment works. Verify it. You saw it already this evening, where I wanted to test and make sure that my meter worked before I went ahead and checked it, before I checked that light bulb. You have to test your equipment. I was having a conversation with Adrian Sterling this afternoon. Adrian was here about a year ago talking about microphones. He's the DPA rep. And he stood up here and talked about microphones that evening. He and I were having a conversation about a problem today at a theater where they were having a significant problem between a computer and a $100,000 audio console. And in order to fix this problem, they had one of the technicians get on a train and go on the train for an hour and a half today, and then they picked him up and drove him for 45 minutes to go to this theater. They went to the theater and they went through everything to try to figure out what on earth was going on. And guess what the problem was? It was a cable. It was just one network cable. So, two things. One, don't assume it's the hard thing. It could be the cable. But the other thing is that what Adrian told me that is really interesting about this story is that as he was packing up today to go to that theater, he pulled out his 100-foot Cat6 cable and tested it to make sure that it worked. Because he wanted to know before he got to the site that and the other pieces that he brought with him were all working. So that when he got there, he didn't have to guess as to whether or not that was going to be a problem and that was a weak link. Because I don't know about you, but the bags that I carry of tools and my computer and all these other things, Cat5 cables are the worst in the bottom of my bag because they all have the tabs broken off or they've all been twisted and bent, that kind of thing. And testing to make sure that cable works before I'm relying on it as a test piece is often a problem. Okay? Moving along, we're on to number 6. Know your equipment and the system. This one's not always as easy because depending on what you're doing, you may really well know your system know your system really well. We're going to go with that one. You may know your system really well, or you may be in a position where you are asked to operate that equipment, but you don't necessarily know it as well as you would like to know it. Okay? So sometimes that's difficult. What you can do, though, is know it as best as you can to your ability. So if you understand as much as you can about how that system works within reason, then that's great. That kind of information can help a lot. As long as you're giving us information that is not assumptions or not things that you're kind of saying, well, I think this is how it works. And if you say that, like if you can actually say, I think this is the way it works, as opposed to it works this way, that's helpful too. A good example on this one is we had a theater client call us up and they said, my mixer isn't working. There's something wrong with the mixer. We've got a show that's starting. This thing's falling apart. We need a new mixer. We need one really fast. And honestly, that does feel like that would be really surprising that a mixer would just all of a sudden do weird things and the sound was strange coming out of the mixer. Except that the part that I haven't told you yet is that it was a Behringer X32. And so then we were kind of like, well, there's a possibility that that could be the problem. But we started going down this road with them. We start talking to them about what's going on, and in the background, we're also quickly trying to find them another mixer. And then we get a phone call back a little while later, and the client said, you know what? We're a little embarrassed, but we found that somebody had inserted an EQ and buried it on the output. And so we thought that our mixer was bad, but it turns out there was just a bad EQ setting on the output. So knowing what your system is and how your equipment is supposed to work is really important, because then you know this is how it's supposed to work. These are the pitfalls I can get myself into. Then I can hopefully try to figure out what those pieces are. This is a good time, and we're going to talk about it again. A lot of these rules, they lead into each other, but resetting things as a testing piece is important. Okay? All right. Number 7. Know the technology. There's 2 different pieces here. Know the technology and then know your ins and your outs. I'm going to talk about know your ins and your outs first. If you have been to Resource Stage sometime over the last 20 years of these seminars and you've heard me talk about this kind of stuff before, you may have heard me go on this rant, which I'm going to give you the short version of tonight because we're talking about other things. One of the things that I find very difficult when somebody calls us up and says, hey, I'm having a problem, and I say, okay, can you tell me how your system is plugged together right now? And if somebody says to me, I have the DMX cable plugged into the mixer, whew, it's been a long day, into the lighting console, and I've got it coming out of the light, then I all of a sudden stop them and say, hold on a second. Did you say you have DMX coming out of the light going into the console? Or is it coming out of the console and going into the light? Because those are 2 very different things. And you might say, well, Carl, that's not possible. You can't have a cable coming out of the light into the console. And I'll tell you, I've seen it. In part because people can come up with adapters like this that can go both ways, right? And so one of the most important things to me when I'm talking to somebody on the phone or by email is I'll say, let's follow the signal chain and let's talk about it from source to, if you're talking about in electrical terms, load, or to the end point, or to whatever that device is at the end. So in the case of our small lighting piece here, we're coming out, we're taking DMX out of the lighting console and going into the fixture. DMX is flowing. It is coming out of the console into the fixture. We're taking audio out of the microphone into the mixer, out of the mixer to the speakers. We're not plugging out of the speaker into the mixer. If that sounds like I am just splitting hairs, it's very difficult to troubleshoot this stuff sometimes because of that kind of conversation. Do you see what I'm getting at? So if you train yourself to be aware of how the signal is flowing, and if you train yourself to say, I'm plugging out of here into here, then you can solve yourself some problems. Unfortunately, we have some really, really fantastic people in the world of technology who love to create cables that have the same end on both ends. Jake, maybe we could jump to this for a second. This is a pretty standard cable. It's an HDMI cable. Can you tell me which end is the male end and the female end? Right? The same thing goes for USB-C, right? all of these things that are coming out from the from the consumer world into the professional world, prosumer world that we live in, those things can make this more difficult to be able to say, I'm taking video out of the computer into the whichever. Do you have a question, sir?
Do you actually encourage the clients to create diagrams
Yes.
of all of their equipment and where cables go from one thing to the other? Because if they're trying to talk to you over the phone, but they don't have a diagram or even something they could send to you,
Yes.
that sort of makes your job harder, and their troubleshooting job now also becomes harder.
Yes.
And then you get into this problem of what I like to term tribal knowledge,
Yes.
which you want to avoid at all costs.
Yes. So that actually is one. So, okay, so you touched on a number of different things there that all kind of come together. So that is a super, super important thing. Documenting your system is important. If you have a system from Horizon, usually when we're done with the system, then we can provide you with a diagram as to what the as-built is. So how we installed things. We typically, actually, that's how we start designing systems. So when somebody says to us, we're looking for a new sound system in our school or in our church, then usually what we do is we start drawing that out so that we can see how the signal flows from A to Z sort of thing, right? Because if we can't see it that way, then we miss pieces. And it's easy to still miss those pieces sometimes, but being able to see how the signal flows, see where adapters are required, see where different kinds of cables are required to work all the way through that. So we will often be designing a system and putting together those drawings as we go. But sometimes, whether a system has been changed or what have you, or sometimes people come to us where they already have a system, then we will often say, can you draw out how your system is laid out? There are some tools for that. We use some tools that cost a lot of money to do that, but we also use some tools that are free. There is a free platform agnostic software called Wide, like YED, and it's easy to find and it's free. You can download it. I think there's a version you can run online. But it's really easy for just graphing out, or not graphing out, for drawing out like a flow diagram, a flow chart for any of your system. And we will often recommend to a client, we will often say, you know what? You have built out a system or you've added on pieces to your system. Why don't you draw this out and then send it to us, and then we can have conversations about how does that work. It's a very, very simple software. Or if you are old school and you're using Visio, you can do that. If you want to use PowerPoint, you can do that. You know, there's tools within PowerPoint to draw that kind of thing out. It's just very helpful for being able to draw it out. Okay? And I think that might be one of the rules. The other piece is knowing the technology. So the ins and the outs is knowing the technology and seeing how it flows. But we're going to take a second here to take a look at another example. So I'm going to move my computer over a bit, maybe get rid of this out of the way. And this is one of our test DVDs around the office, is the classic Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And we use this regularly for just testing things to make sure things work. And what I've got going on here is just a Blu-ray playing with an HDMI cable that's only like 4 or 5 feet into the monitor. Well, one of the first things that comes up is when people say, well, I want my Blu-ray player to go a further distance, because HDMI, if you know anything about HDMI, it maxes out at about 50 feet. Okay? There's conversations about that. We can talk about that. We can talk about various different reasons or very different 50 feet. Did my mic just drop out? Yes, it did. All right. Well, somebody's going to need to troubleshoot that. Okay. So, getting past 50 feet. So just for our example tonight, we're going to say one of the most common ways of extending a video signal in 2025 is to use SDI. So I'm going to take my HDMI signal out of the Blu-ray player, and I'm going to go into this SDI to HDMI converter. I'm going to go out of this rather cheesy SDI converter into another SDI to HDMI converter, find myself another HDMI cable, and HDMI out, plug that into the monitor, and there goes my mic again. So, how'd that work out for us? Not so well. So let's just make sure that I did this right. So I'm HDMI in, SDI out. I am SDI in, HDMI. Hold on. HDMI out. Give it a second, because monitors can be like that sometimes. And I got nothing. Any ideas why I've got nothing? Yes. Do we know that the converters are working? That's a really good question. So we said, as we've worked through things, we've said that we need to, first of all, identify the problem. The problem is we're not sending signal. Then we need to look at it and say, do we have power? Well, we know we had power because we started off with power. Data would be the next thing in this, right? So as we're taking a look at this, and again, I'm skipping over the documentation because you're all here and the video is our documentation for tonight. That's the story I'm going with. So converters, let's test that. You know what? I'm going to stop for a second. I'm going to say, can we check the cable first? Let's check the cable first. I'm going to dump the cable out of here momentarily, throw that over here, grab a different cable, SDI input, SDI output. My Blu-ray player is still playing, I know that. And something just happened. Am I going to get signal? The monitor thinks it's seeing something, but I'm not getting any video. Okay, so the question was, can we confirm that the converters are working? So I have a piece of test equipment here. This is a device that we use pretty often. It's pretty awesome. It is not $25 from Amazon. And it allows us to test different resolutions with different timings. So we can go up to 4K and do 4K 60. I don't know that it does 4K. I don't know that it does past 60. But then we can try different timings and different sorts of things. It's pretty handy. We also have the another version of this, which is the receiver end, so we can test lines back and forth. So let's test this. I'm going to pull the HDMI line out of the Blu-ray player, plug it into here. We know the monitor works because we were watching Bill and Ted's earlier. And so when I put this into here, in theory, if all of this is peachy, I should get test signal. So that tells me, theoretically, that my generator is working. My HDMI cable from here to this converter box is working. My SDI line from here to here is working. And my HDMI cable from here to here is working. My goal was to go to the long SDI cable. So let's put that back in and just make sure that that's working as well. SDI out. SDI in. Make sure my generator hasn't shut off. It's working. So, why has this not been working with my Blu-ray player? Yes, sir.
Does your Blu-ray player accept SDI?
Interesting question. So the question is, does the Blu-ray player accept SDI? So I am going to first of all go back to the know your ins and your outs. So where the Blu-ray player is not seeing any SDI input, it is an output of HDMI going to the SDI converter and then through. So the Blu-ray player doesn't know anything about SDI. It doesn't know about it because it's just plugged into there. So we are on rule number 7. Rule number 7, know your technology. A couple of things that you need to know about a Blu-ray player. The first thing about a Blu-ray player is that it automatically encodes a thing called HDCP on its output. HDCP is a copyright protection protocol. It's intended to keep you from doing anything nasty like copying Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure to share with all your friends. Because it's such a, I know, it's a crime. So it is stopping you from doing that. So when we come out of the Blu-ray player and we try to convert that signal, it's going to say, hold on a second. Should you be converting this signal to SDI? That's the first problem. The second piece of technology we're working with here is SDI. And SDI is a protocol, or it's a technology that is designed specifically for sending video that does not carry copyright protection, because it doesn't have any need to do that, because SDI is originally designed to go from cameras to the camera truck, from cameras to a switcher, that then becomes a copyright broadcast as a whole, whether it's the Leafs game or the Blue Jays game or the whatever it is. It's intended to be captured as not copyright material until it's put together as a whole. So we are using a technology that's designed to keep you from doing something that you're not supposed to do, and it's embedding a copyright protection technology. And now we're trying to send it over a technology that says, I don't know and don't care about copyright protection. Okay? Tonight isn't really about learning about HDCP. What tonight is about is learning that we need to know kind of how these pieces of technology fit together. Okay? And why this might be an issue. Alrighty? Okay. Yeah. Is there anything else I need to talk about this? I don't think so. Any questions about this before I move on? Nope.
Why are you using a Blu-ray player?
Why am I using a Blu-ray player? Well, I'm using a Blu-ray player because it's handy. I'm using a Blu-ray player because it's handy. There are other ways to do this, and there are other times when this can be a little bit more interesting. So, for instance, and what Jordan is getting at, poking at me, is there are times when you plug your computer into this sort of scenario and it will pass video. There are times when you plug your computer into this scenario and it will not pass video. And unfortunately, that can change depending on whether it's a full moon or not, and depending on what you're doing on your computer. Okay? And that's all I'm saying about that, Jordan. That's not the kind of night it is. Okay, moving on. Number 8. Number 8? Are we moving on to number 8? There we go. Check your assumptions. Trust your experience and your intuition. Definitely. If you've used technology for any length of time, you probably have learned a couple of things. You've probably learned that if I do that on my computer, and I do this, 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 and it's getting slow, maybe I should reboot my computer. Once every 6 months for some of us. Maybe it's time. If the light bulb goes out, maybe I should check the light bulb. Use your intuition because it's probably going to be helpful for you. Okay? I think that makes perfect sense. Number 9. Don't let your assumptions cloud your judgment. Be careful about using your intuition. Because sometimes we can get in this spot where we're like, oh, you know what? I bet you I know exactly what it is. And sometimes we can think about it's this big complicated thing, or sometimes we can think it's really, really simple, but there's something else to the story. And the piece that I throw in here is this: beware of your recency bias. That can be really, really dangerous. Like, for instance, when you're in a situation where you say, I was at Horizon and I saw that that video signal didn't work because of HDCP. I bet you that's the problem. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else. So, should you use your intuition? Yes. Should you temper it and just make sure, just still think through the process? Absolutely. This is one of the most difficult things for all of us to get past. Absolutely, positively. Whether you are just troubleshooting things with your bedroom sound system, or whether you are doing something on tour. It's really, really difficult to not say, well, no, last time I saw this, so I bet you it's something like that. It happens all the time. Okay? All right, moving on. Once it's fixed, break it again to ensure that you know you use the right fix. So if I go through with, say, something like this, and I break it, and then I fix it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, if I just took this and plugged this cable into my computer, then I could easily say, the problem is the Blu-ray player. The Blu-ray player is the issue. Everything else is okay. Well, maybe you need to take the Blu-ray player and plug it directly into the TV again and see. And if you don't know the answers about what's going on with the technology, then you may just say, well, there's something wrong there. I don't know what it is. But if you can create the problem and create it again, it may be that you got it working for your show or your church service and you're okay. But if you want to know more about what's going on, you may want to call Horizon or call the manufacturer or call somebody and say, okay, this is the scenario. This is how I documented it. Here's my drawing of my system. What do you think happened? Why is it that it's working now? Because I don't want to have to go through this again next time. Okay? Make sense? This one came from some of the people that we work with who work on networking and computers all the time. And Scott's here nodding his head like he's a bobblehead because he's been through this before. And this is one of those situations where a lot of times people say, have you tried rebooting it? And a lot of times we're like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, let's try rebooting it and see if it works. Oh yeah, look at that, it works. We're good. Okay, but did you solve the problem? Or did you just kick the problem down the road a little bit further? How do you know that you've actually fixed the problem or haven't? Almost every device that we work with today has some sort of a log, some sort of a backup information. You need to save the backup show file, and if there is a log, if there is an error log, save that information as well so that you can then reproduce whatever is going on before you've rebooted the system or before you've reset everything to default. Does that make sense? So often we'll have somebody and they'll go, I have a problem with my system. I reset it to 0. Okay, great. Is it working? Well, I think so. Okay, have you reloaded your show file from your audio console, from your lighting console? Oh, was I supposed to do that? Can I not get it back? If you don't have that on USB or if you don't have it backed up somewhere, you might be completely out of luck. Or if it is an error log, if you haven't saved that error log, so many devices when it reboots, that error log is gone. And now we can't see what are the things that happened when it booted up. What are the things that happened when that network changed? What are the things? And if we can't see that, it's much more difficult for us to help. Does that make sense? All right. Number 12. We said there's 12, right? Check the software firmware to confirm that you have the latest compatible updates. I don't know about you. I don't know how often you call tech support for different things. We do it fairly often because we work with so many different manufacturers that each one does some things that are a little bit different. And it doesn't really, like, we are required to know how everything that's on this tables on these cases, we are required to know how they all work and what the nuances are. And what's the nuance difference between this cheapo SDI converter and this slightly more expensive but from a more reputable brand SDI converter? How do we know what the nuance difference are? So we often are talking to manufacturers, and one of the first things that they say is, are you running the latest firmware? Because they have theoretically made changes to firmware, to the software for those devices, to try to fix any problems that they've heard about in their service calls, in the phone calls from the last 35 people, right? So theoretically, that firmware or that software update could be solving the problem that you've got. And we hear this all the time from manufacturers where they're saying, have you checked the firmware? Have you made sure that you've downloaded the latest version from the from the website? That kind of thing. When is a time you shouldn't update the firmware? 5 minutes before showtime is a fantastic time to not not update your firmware. Absolutely. For those of you who might be from the church world, I think it was ProPresenter a couple of months ago came up with an update on like a Saturday, and a number of people had that update on Sunday morning, and if they clicked yes, they had a very, very bad Sunday. And that happened to a number of different people. And maybe it wasn't released on Saturday, but that's when people got it. So should you be updating the firmware? Definitely not right before showtime. But what's another time that you shouldn't be updating it? Yes?
I've heard from experience not to update things immediately after the update comes out because sometimes there's problems with it.
So don't update immediately when it comes out. I think that's not a bad idea. Absolutely. Yeah, if that firmware comes out, maybe give it some time. Maybe let somebody else be the guinea pig, especially if you are in a situation like most of us are, where there's people sitting in an audience, whether that is a paid audience or whether that's people who've come to a church service or a school. If they're sitting in the audience and they're all going to be staring at you when everything comes crashing down, yeah, maybe you should let somebody else be the guinea pig before you do it. Anything else? Yes.
Should updates be defaulted to a manual update as opposed to automatic on your equipment?
Should updates be defaulted to manual rather than automatic? I would say that 99% of the time we will do manual updates, not automatic updates, so that we know when something's going to happen, and we know that it's not going to happen right before showtime, and we know that we can see what's going on. But that leads into one of the things I was getting at, and that is there is a time when you shouldn't be doing a firmware update if the firmware update that you are looking at may not fix what your problem is and you've got other problems. This becomes more of an issue when you have multiple things working together. So there are situations where, especially when we're dealing with control systems, where this device is connected to this device, is connected to this device, is connected to this device. And if we change the firmware on the middle piece, then what does that mean to how it's going to interact with the other devices? Now, if we're talking about a standardized protocol like DMX between this device and this device, well, that's one thing. Then, if I do an update to this, theoretically, it's not going to change anything that has to do with this. But if we're talking about systems where we have a touch screen that's connected to a device, and then that is then connected to a network switch that then is connected to something else, an amplifier or some other output device, and all of those pieces, the firmware that they're running, they all need to be connected, then often we will stand back and we'll say, if I change this firmware, how are the dominoes going to fall? How are all these pieces going to play out? If you talk to Chris in our office, who does a lot of our systems commissioning and system programming, he'll tell you that some of the core pieces, and that sounds like a terrible pun if you know what I'm talking about, but some of those core components, you do not want to do those updates to that core piece, because if you do an update, it could break all kinds of other pieces in the system. So you might do an update here, an update here, an update here, but you need to be very careful about whether you're going to update the main core of the system. Dante and network switches are two of the biggest problems. Yes, absolutely. So a good example would be a couple of weeks ago, we were troubleshooting a problem at a client's location. That system has a significant amount of Dante in the system. It has a number of Dante endpoints from multiple manufacturers. I don't know, Don, probably 4 different manufacturers of Dante devices. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, probably at least.
Somewhere in that area, right? And there are 3 network switches in that system. After we figured that everything was working fine, we rebooted the entire system. Audio was coming in on devices through Dante from the Shure Wireless, coming into the Allen & Heath mixer, going out of the Allen & Heath mixer to the amplifier, to the QSYS core, out of the QSYS core to the amplifiers. Everything was passing and it was all working. But if you know anything about Dante controller was giving all kinds of flags saying, this isn't right, this isn't right, this isn't right. It was all passing. If it was showtime, we would have said, we'll go with it and we'll figure it out later. But it wasn't showtime, it was Tuesday. So we were sitting there looking at it, and finally Chris realized that of the 3 switches that Dante was passing through, 2 of them had a different firmware than the one. Updated the firmware in all 3. Everything was peachy after a reboot. So you know what we did then? We didn't go back and turn it back into the old firmware. Remember I said change things back and see whether or not that fixed it? We didn't do that. But what we did do is we rebooted the system 3 more times. Because we wanted to know that after we did it, what happened? After we did it, what happened? Along the way, checking things like the logs, that kind of stuff. What were the errors? Each time, reboot the system. Did it actually work? Yes. Great. We walked away from it. That was 3 weeks ago. Client hasn't reported any issues with the network since. Okay? Cool. All right. That's number 12. If you've ever come to Resource Stage before, you know that I always have some sort of bonus. Know when you need to ask for help. This is an interesting one because this is the who wants to be a millionaire? Is that right? Call a friend. Or, as I said, we have a couple of different signs around our office. One of them is about things being complicated. And then this is the other one that's in my office. This guy. Because sometimes you need to know when to hold them and when to fold them. And really, seriously, I think about this all the time. I think about at what point in time do we need to just say, okay, hold on a second. This isn't working. We need to stop in this direction and we need to go in this direction. We can't fix this before the show. We can't fix this before Sunday. We need to do this, head in this direction, and then we will deal with that later. That especially when it comes to shows, especially when it comes to it's Sunday morning, you need to be able to know when to say, I can't do any more here. I have to stop. I need to focus on what I need to do to get through the show or get through the service. Does that make sense? Thank you, Kenny Rogers. I mean, it wasn't actually Kenny who wrote the song, but anyway. So, I have a couple more examples for you. Has anybody got any questions so far? How are we doing? Is this making sense? Is this helpful at all? All right. You got a question?
Owner's manuals or user manuals.
How often do you use them?
How often do we use user manuals? We use user manuals pretty regularly. I think we use user manuals pretty regularly. It does depend to an extent on the manufacturer and which manufacturer it is and how good their user manuals are. But I would say that we do use them. Sometimes we're using service notes more than we're using user manuals. Sometimes the most useful thing in a user manual is just one short piece of information that it takes you a half an hour or an hour to dig through to find it, because there'll be something like you'll be trying to figure out whether or not that device is balanced or unbalanced, and nothing tells you whether or not it's balanced or unbalanced. Sometimes you'll be digging through things and you'll find out that you can or can't do something with something. And that may be the trick to say, yes, we're heading in the right direction, or no, we're not heading in the right direction. Does that sound right to you, Don? Yep. Yeah. I think that's kind of the biggest pieces. Okay. I just moved the camera, but I want to show you another example on this lighting piece, which I don't think we need the camera on the console for this. But I have another light here. This one right here. First of all, I'm going to open all the shutters. We don't need to do that twice. I'm going to turn on number 2, and I've got nothing going on there. Knowing what we've talked about tonight, first, we're going to say, what is the problem? The problem is I've got no light. Nothing's going on. Document the problem. We've already talked about that. Is the power good? Well, I think it's blinking, right? Is the data good? Why do you think the data is not good, Scott? Because it's blinking. See, there we go. Okay, but I've got a data cable going into it. So what do you think the problem could be? Huh. All right. So I've got DMX in going in right here, being fed from the DMX out right here. Perfect. Exactly. I have created a perfect data loop within the same fixture. I can't make this up. We have definitely seen this on more than one occasion. And when I say on more than one occasion, it's easy for us to do this on our own shows. But we've definitely seen clients do the same thing. It's not hard to create your own little loop. So as soon as I plug that in, I got light. Pretty simple, right? But really, really easy to make a mess of. Okay? Boy, Scott, that was way too easy. Okay. Moving back over here for a second, we're going to take a look at some classic audio ones. The first classic audio issue would be, I'm going to take this microphone. That microphone seems to be working just fine, right? This microphone, not so fine. This is the most classic issue with a microphone. What's wrong? Yes. The gain. Well, the gain is actually not bad on this one, and I will mute it and just bring up the gain as we go just to see. I'll hit PFL, so theoretically I should get some stuff there. I'm not seeing anything there. If it's not the gain, what else might it be? Yes.
Which input is it plugged in?
It is, oh, good question. It is plugged into, let's make sure, it's plugged into input number 2. So I've got input number 2 here. I've got it unmuted. What do you think my problem is? Is there a line and mic switch? You know, there isn't on this mixer. There is a, this is a nice little Personas mixer. There is a little button that looks like a guitar, and that's your line and mic switch. But yes, That's a good question, but no, that doesn't seem to be the issue at this point. Yes, sir. Is it turned on? There is no switch on this microphone for on and off. There is a switch for high pass filter, but that's it. So it's a low cut. So that's the only thing there. Anybody else? Phantom power. The most classic problem with any of these. So before I go ahead and try fixing this, I'm going to turn down the mains so that we don't all have a problem. I'm going to bring on the phantom power. You could see that it just flashed there for a second. And now when I bring this up, oh, let's bring the mains back up. Now when I bring this up, then I've got microphone. I know the problem. I'm getting no sound. I know I've got power, but do I have power? Because this guy needs power. He's a condenser microphone. Do I have data? Well, I didn't have data and I didn't have power. So I need to figure out what was going on there. But this is also one of those pieces where you need to know your technology, right? So it's a few different pieces fit together there. Because there's lots of people who don't realize that you need phantom power for certain types of microphones. Okay? Cool. All right. So we have that. Jordan, do we still have your computer playing over here, or did it go to sleep? Uh-oh. I think it might have gone to sleep.
I'll wake it up.
Do you want to come wake it up?
It's playing.
All right, it's playing. So we have Jordan's favorite song playing over here, and I'm going to unmute this. Can you hear that? Sounds really nice, doesn't it? Isn't that an amazing hum? It's really, really good. So let's take a quick look at this for a second. We have a nice unbalanced cord that is kind of long and kind of all over the place. And I think we decided that this has got a nice connection to it. Maybe we can do this without creating too much of a problem. See, it's got less of a hum now that I've actually... I had somebody contact me recently because they were having a problem, and it was their wireless microphone. For sure, it was their wireless microphone. Kept popping. Absolutely, positively, it's their wireless microphone. They changed the batteries. They checked the cables. They checked the microphone. They checked the cables. They changed frequencies. They went through all those different things. Absolutely, it's the wireless microphone. Went through it, went through it, went through it, went through it. It's absolutely the wireless microphone. I stood in the sound booth watching the console to see... Well, actually, first I started and I was watching the receivers. So I was watching to see what the receivers were doing as I was waiting for the microphone to do something funky. And then it did it. I heard the noise again. And I thought, well, that's weird. There was no indication on the receivers as to what happened. So then I thought, okay, well, the next thing I got to do is I got to watch the console. So I stood over top of the sound person's shoulder, which they always love that. And I watched. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and sure enough, there it goes again. You know what it was? It wasn't the microphone. It was the computer that was plugged in with an unbalanced cable from the output of the Mac into the console with a cable kind of like this, where it was making all kinds of noise. But it was definitely the wireless microphone. It's really, really easy to do that. It's super easy to do that. And we can get caught on that as well. Because again, we can make those assumptions based on our previous experience. And what is the thing that fails? Well, of course, wireless microphones fail. And I am not going to try to convince you that they don't, because they do. But sometimes something like that can drive us off in a direction. So if this is our problem here, what do we need to do to fix it? And this is a little bit less about troubleshooting, and this is more of a, here's a suggestion about dealing with unbalanced cables over long distances. And the first thing that we would typically recommend you do is get rid of that cable. Find yourself a long XLR cable, and then, as we would do with any of these devices, we would test that XLR cable to make sure that it's working. And in this tester, I can just go through and I can press the buttons. If the button lights up, then it's connected to the right piece, to the right pin, and nothing on the chassis, so I know that this is a good XLR cable. So I can now take this one. I'm going to plug this into an input on the console so that I know I've got a good balanced input that can go, in this case it's a 75-foot cable. And as somebody said, I can use a DI box. In this case, this is a radial SB5, which is a DI box that's specifically made for coming out of a laptop or a device like this. And when I plug that in, now when I go to this channel, I can unmute it, and I've got tons of signal, and it sounds good. Cool? That one costs some money. However, you don't have to use an SB5. You can use a DI box that you've got for a guitar or something like that, and just use a cable that's that's an 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch to do a similar sort of thing. And if you want to talk about that, we can definitely talk to you about what cables you should use to do that. So that's a good way to go. Except, has anybody noticed that we seem to be having another problem with the sound system? Anybody? Yes, sir. It's only coming out of one speaker. That's no fun. So, if I'm following my cables here, I have a line coming out of my computer into the DI box, which actually is all part and parcel. It's all part of the cable. Then I'm coming out of the DI box, the SB5, into the console. And the console, if you can see it here, is sending a signal to both, this channel, to both left and right. And I've got left and right coming out of the output. So, what should I check? First thing is I need to identify the problem. We identified the problem. The speaker on my right, your left is not working. So, in the steps that we started off with, the first thing to check would be power. Let's check and see if it's got power. It has power. Power switch is on. I don't know if you can see it, but I can see there's an LCD display there. This speaker actually has an option for turning the LED on the front of the speaker on. We typically actually turn it off because when we're doing corporate stuff, we don't really like to have the blue light on the front. But we know that it's on. So that's good. What was the next thing after power? Data. So I need to check this and figure out, is it actually getting the right signal? Well, first of all, the speaker's turned down, so maybe that could be part of it, but I don't see any signal coming in there. And nothing else, there's no signal light is not flashing. So I'm going to unplug this cable from here, and I'm going to, well, I guess the best way to figure out whether or not I've got the right cable would be to do this. This one. I'm going to go back to my cable tester, plug in this end over here, plug in this end over here. Now I'm going to do it actually in front of the camera. That'll be nice. And pin 1. Whoa. Pin 1 is connected to pin 3, it looks like. Pin 2 is doing nothing. Pin 3 is doing nothing. that's interesting that pin 1 and 2 are connected, or pin 1 and 3 are connected, because I know who messed up this cable for us on purpose, and I don't think they did that on purpose. So it's possible that there's a strand of wire in there that's touch anyway. Okay, so we're gonna disconnect that cable, pull out a different cable. Oh, right here. I got another cable here. Before I go ahead and take the time to plug it in and run it across the floor in my banquet hall or in my church or in my school, I'm going to pull out my tester again. 1, 2, 3, chassis. We're good. Now I'm going to plug this into here. I'm going to turn down the volume so that the people who've started to come in because they showed up early to get cookies are not going to get their heads blown off. I'm going to turn that down. Then I'm going to bring that up a bit. And now we have sound out of both speakers. Signal light right there. All right. So there you go. We went through, we used all these different rules. These are not the only rules. These are not the only things. These are the ones that as we were going through this, we kind of said, these are the things that seem to stand out. These are the ones that over and over and over again will help you as you're trying to troubleshoot things. These are the ones that we somewhat subconsciously go through, and these are the ones that when I went and asked people to provide their input, they brought up. And I have to say thank you to all those people who helped out. Nancy and Doug from Stratford, Ian who works for Gare, they're the Meyer, Digico, Clearcom, DPA guys. Andrew who designs and troubleshoots systems for people with Shure and has done stuff with QSC and a whole bunch of different manufacturers. Wyatt who works for High End and ETC. Bobby who works for High End. Debbie who's a professional touring front of house and monitor technician. Craig who works for Fanshawe College. Michael Harris who is a retired sales rep for ETC. Adrian Sterling who is with DPA, with the distributor for DPA, Digico, Clearcom, Sound Devices, Gare Audio, Glen Sound, a whole bunch of other companies, and then the Horizon people. They helped us kind of put together this list. There are some other things that could have made the list. One of the things that Craig brought up is labeling all of your cables as much as you can. Labeling so that you know how all these pieces fit together is really, really important. And seeing how those pieces go so that when you unplug something, then you know how did it go back in. That could be that you go and buy yourself a good label maker, or it could be that you get yourself some board tape and a Sharpie. I would highly recommend you don't use duct tape or painter's tape. Please don't. But using a label so that you know what is going on, so that when something gets unplugged, whether it's temporarily for that one event, you just temporarily had to unplug this and plug this back in, or whether that is that you're troubleshooting and you need to unplug something and then you need to realize that you're using the right one. Okay. That's something that was, that came up. I can tell you that, again, I was speaking with Adrian earlier on today and I said to him, hey, do you have any other thoughts that we should talk about tonight? He said, again, change one thing at a time. Do not change multiple things. Everybody on that list said change one thing at a time. Every one of them. They say that because they've changed two at a time. And it came back to bite them. That's how we all know. All right? So, that's it. I hope that was helpful. I hope that it made some sense. I hope that some of our examples tonight kind of helped to maybe explain a couple things. I've got some other tools up here that we use for testing things that we find really, really helpful. And it's really important to be able to have the right tools and tools that you can trust. If you have never been to Resource Stage before, thanks for coming tonight. If you've never watched online, thanks for watching tonight. We do these seminars throughout the year. We do take a break in December, so we won't have anything specific going on next month. But we will be back in January, and we're coming back in January with a Resource Stage conversation, which is something that's kind of become a tradition around here, where I sit down with an industry professional and we talk about how did they get to where they are today, and what did their path look like, and what do they do in their job today, that kind of thing, which is pretty cool. I really like it because I think there's some pretty awesome people in this industry who don't get to talk about who they are and what they do. And there's people who stand at the end of a show and they applaud what's going on stage, and they don't realize some of the stuff that's going on behind. It's pretty awesome to sit down and talk with some of these people. It's very cool. So that'll be in January. We'll be coming out shortly with what's going to be happening in February, March, April. If you have showed up to Resource Stage, or if you have watched online, you will be able to sign up for, or you should already be enrolled in the giveaway that we're doing to mark our 20th anniversary of Resource Stage seminars. And in December, I think we're doing it in December, right? In December, we're going to be drawing names. One name, and that person is going to be going home with a pair of nice Genelec monitors. They're pretty awesome. The boxes have a couple of wrinkles on them now, because we've been traveling around to different shows and things and pulling them out and showing people that's what we're giving away. But they sound awesome, and they're a really good thing. So if you haven't got your name registered for tonight, make sure you do that before you leave. One of the other things that we have going on is for schools. We have this thing that we're calling Resource Stage Study Hall, which is, are they half an hour, 45 minutes each? 45 minutes. And we're doing them on PA days. And so the next PA day is this Friday. So from 12:30 to 1:30, we're doing one on lighting. And then at 1:30, we're doing another session on sound systems. And it's very simple. It's just talking about how to put together a lighting system, what are some of the things you need to know about a lighting system, and how an audio system works. This is specifically designed for teachers and students who don't know much about technology and don't know about stuff, but they are required to make it happen for that winter show that they've got coming up, at the concert they've got coming up sometime in the next few weeks. Does that sound about right? Yep. Okay. So if you know a teacher who you think would benefit from watching one of these, please feel free to pass this along. It's Resource Stage / Study Hall. But anybody can watch it. Anybody can check it out. And I just want to bring your attention to one other thing that we're doing, and that is that Jordan and a number of the other people here have been putting a bunch of work into these social media posts that he's been calling, I guess we've been calling, Pro Tip Tuesday. And so on Tuesdays, almost every Tuesday, every other Tuesday? Okay, every other Tuesday, he is posting something that's a short video that is a tip. And so we just released one today, and I thought it would be kind of cool if we went ahead and showed this one. Are you good there, Jake? All right, great. Here it is. Are you good there, Jake? Okay.
We're here at the Palace Theater bringing you a pro tip for anyone working in theater who's ever got their stage directions mixed up. Remember this, stage directions are from the performer's perspective. Think about it like this. Imagine yourself lying on your back at center stage. Stage left is to your left. Stage right is to your right. Upstage is up past your head towards the back of the stage. And downstage is your toes down towards the audience. This is center stage. This is upstage. This is stage right. This is stage left. And this is downstage. Here's a fun fact. Upstage and downstage are so called because historically, many theaters had a sloped or raked stage, sloping from the back to the front. Knowing your way around on stage can make working in a theater environment way less stressful. If you found today's pro tip helpful, like and follow us for more.
I think that Jordan and the other folks here are doing an awesome job on those. Very good, Jordan. So as much as I am never one to say spend more time on social media, if you do spend time on social media and you follow us, you'll find more and more tips like that, and they span a whole bunch of different things. So you'll find those on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you very much for coming tonight, and I hope this was helpful. If you've got any questions, feel free to stick around and ask those. And again, thank you for coming. Have a good night.